there was a time in my life where I looked up and I did not see light or hope at all. I didn't feel like things would ever change. And for me, hope has become defined as the understanding that things can and will change, and that you, as an individual, have control over what direction that change takes and have control over seeing hope. It's a point of view, it's a perspective thing. It's hard to get to when you're in a very dark place, but I just like to tell everybody out there who may be in that place, your tomorrows can be completely different from your yesterdays. Hope that it's going to get better, do things to make it better, and it will. I'm Michael Broussard, author and performer of the interactive stage show Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor, and I share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
Michael, Chris Williams, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Still a good time to talk about hope?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Man, that's awesome. So, first of all, thanks for your time.
No.
I know you're busy. You have a lot going on, and you are obviously reaching a lot of people. So, I'm sure you have a few other people demanding your time, so thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this. I appreciate that.
Oh, man, I love the style you've got on this subject. All right, let me walk you through briefly the interview so you know what's coming, and that'll keep it a little smoother. So you probably already received the Interview 101 document that has the list of all the questions. And
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I follow that pretty close, and I kind of stay with it. So you're gonna hear you talk a lot more than me. This is the most talking I'll do the entire time.
Okay.
So really, I just want you to be you. Tell your story. You get to answer the questions, and there's no direction for me on how you do that or where you go with it. Typically, people get a little bit more into their story, obviously, in question number 3. But again, however you lead into that is your deal. And at the end of a few questions, I may just summarize if there's a key point worth pulling out that I need to. I'll jump in there. But otherwise, man, it's your deal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So make sure I get your last name right. Say your name, the last name, the way you want it pronounced.
Broussard.
That's what I would have thought. Okay, just making
Cool,
sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So Michael Broussard.
Yep.
Awesome. Wayne, let's do this.
Okie doke, here we go.
Okay. Michael Broussard is with us today sharing hope. So if you don't know who Michael is yet, you will soon. Michael is a guy who has turned his story into a story. I don't know how else to say that. He's got a performance and a set of things that he does on stage. I'm trying not to let the cat out of the bag here, and ways that he communicates to certain groups that is really powerful and takes something tragic and brings it back around to hope and a place where people can actually talk about something that they may have never talked about before. So, Michael, we will get more and more to that, I'm sure. But first of all, tell us a little about you. Where are you at today? What are you up to in life?
Well, I'm working very heavily in theater. One of the additional things I do is I produce, direct, and host a show called the 5 Minute Follies, which is a variety show. If you've ever seen the old Ed Sullivan Show,
absolutely.
It's that idea. It's comics, magicians, jugglers, all kinds of crazy acts, and that's the thing I do for fun. And I have a great time emceeing those and telling stupid jokes and presenting all this great stuff. And we get families coming to it. We've had 3 generations of families coming to it. So that's probably the thing I do that gives me a great amount of joy in life.
That's cool. I love it. Okay, so Michael, you get to jump in here, and I'm going to ask question 1 through 5, and you know how this goes. We ask 1,000 people on the globe from all walks of life these same 5 questions, and we're compiling that in the form of a research project, and now, obviously, a podcast people can listen to. So, question 1, Michael, what is your definition of hope, or your favorite quote about hope?
Well, I think my definition of hope has grown over the years I've been on this planet, basically. Not that I was on another planet before, but there was a time in my life where I looked up and I did not see light or hope at all. I didn't feel like things would ever change. And for me, hope has become defined as the understanding that things can and will change, and that you, as an individual, have control over what direction that change takes and have control over seeing hope. It's a point of view, it's a perspective thing. It's hard to get to when you're in a very dark place, but I just like to tell everybody out there who may be in that place, your tomorrows can be completely different from your yesterdays. Hope that it's going to get better, do things to make it better, and it will.
Man, that's really good. I love the part about you have control over how you're working through that, and it really does sometimes seems like we don't have any control. It's too dark, but you're right. There's more tomorrow, and there's something you can do about it. Yeah. Well, with that definition, then question 2 is, who has shared the most hope with you? Who's really given that to you in life?
Well, I would like to talk about 2 different people that I've got, 2 different avenues that I've gotten hope from. The first is my wife, Christy. I went through a lot of very bad relationships in my life, and they were often negatively affected by the trauma and the difficulty that I had seen in my life. Christy was the first person to patiently walk me through the stress and the trauma and support me while I was growing, getting better, and finding hope in life and finding reasons to be happy. So she's been an immense influence on my positive outlook. I cannot thank her enough. The other thing that gives me a great amount of hope, specifically in reference to the show that I do, is that we now have something called social media. And when I was growing up, now let me say specifically what I went through was childhood sexual abuse. And that has an immense, far-reaching effect on your psyche. Can leave you in a place where you feel very shut off, very alone. You don't want to talk to anyone. You're afraid to talk to anyone. And when I was a kid, there was no Facebook, there was no Twitter, there was none of this stuff. Now we have all these social media outlets. So these people like myself, who may be at that stage when they're sad, when they're afraid, when they think if they talk to anybody about this, they're going to run away, can establish relationships with people at a distance via social media, and can find other people who've been through the same trauma by searching out pages and searching out advocacy groups and searching out peer-to-peer support groups online. So we who cannot face people yet and speak to them in person can grow our ability to speak in person about this, can grow our ability to make human connection through social media. And that is giving me an enormous amount of hope, not just for healing for people who have been through what I've been through, but also for the potential change we can affect in the way the justice system sees these crimes, in the way clinicians, psychologists treat patients, in public policy. The more of us there are and the more connected we are, the more we can do. I would like to speak specifically, there's an organization called Safe Kids International, and one of the things they do, and their main thrust, is they advocate for kids who have been taken out of the home, away from their protective parent, that's the one who's looking after them, and either given to the parent who abused them or put into a foster home. And what they do is they do direct advocacy to get that kid back with the parent who will protect them. And without social media, those kind of campaigns would not be possible. So the whole social media thing, as much as it gets knocked sometimes, for survivors like myself, is the biggest, most important asset we have.
I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't agree more. I'm thrilled and agree with you on Christy, your wife, and her position in your life and sharing hope. The same story for me. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse as well, childhood sexual abuse, and and my wife has been tremendous. But you're right, the ability to tiptoe into a conversation when you can still stay a little private and not expose everything, and doing that online is so helpful because it just gets you started. Wow, man, that's good.
It's interesting that you should say you're also a survivor, because I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but there's a thing with survivors where sometimes you can kind of feel it coming that someone else is going to turn out to be a survivor as well. And I felt a little of that in your tone, but I was just waiting to see how the conversation opened up. There are people who literally I have sat down with, looked at across the table, I've never met before, and they say one thing and my mind goes, they're one of us.
I know exactly what you mean. It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it's weird and it's wonderful. It just it brings us together, and it bridges that gap where most people are terrified to speak about whatever's inside them that is making them feel lost. Mm-hmm. And bridging that gap is like an amazing moment in life that hardly ever happens, but when it does happen, it's just magical.
It is, and I think I get more out of that when I get to share a little of my story with somebody else who's just beginning the journey. I grow and heal so much. You think, well, I've already healed. No, you're healing constantly, and no matter what trauma you've been through in life, if you get to a point where you can start sharing your story and helping somebody else, that's a huge part of the healing. It's great.
Wow. Yeah, that is. It's so nice to actually talk to another person who gets that completely. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, Michael, you're on that note. You're sharing way more about you and your story than most people that I've heard of. You know, if it's 1 in 6 people who've been abused between age 0 and 18 as children, or if it's 1 in 20, whatever statistics you follow in that range, there's still way too many. And with that huge number, there are very, very few who actually communicate their story and really publicly address this issue. That's what you do. So with question 3, take us back to a time and help us see what was going on when you were at that hopeless place you mentioned ago. Because a lot of people would look at you and say, well, you're past it, you've healed, it must not have been that bad. I could never end up like you with as much hope. Well, where'd you come from, you know?
I have to tell you that, first of all, and I'm sure you will understand this, and many people in the audience will understand this as well, to say that I'm quote-unquote past it, that will probably never be 100% true. One of the things that came up in therapy was I kept going to therapy thinking it was going to fix me. And one day I was going to wake up and I was going to be fine, and I wouldn't have to try anymore to deal with this stuff. And what I learned from the good therapists I've had is that it's more about managing it. You learn to manage it so you can do some things you need to do. And I will tell you right now, and I think this is important for everybody to know who's gone through trauma or has these kind of life difficulties, my therapist, my most recent therapist, and the one before that said the same thing to me. If you have a time, a day, where you wake up and things are so bad that you can't deal, don't deal. Watch TV, read a book, get your way through it, because you need that energy to go to the next thing. And then the next thing, like you say, what I do, I get out on stage and I tell my story, this very private story. Well, to do that, I need to take care of myself as well. And it is actually a great and very hopeful thing that we can manage this and we can function. It just takes a lot of time. Now, going back to what happened to me, I was molested by my stepfather, a trusted guardian. I think that's something that people need to understand too, is that children are always warned about stranger danger. But statistically, it is far more likely that the person that molests you is going to be a family member or a family friend or a trusted person in the community, someone you know. And that just completely screws with your head, because you're looking at this person who's supposed to take care of you, and they're putting pain into you. And they don't care how you feel. It doesn't matter to them how you feel. It's only about how they feel. And at that time, over the course of the time that I was being molested, my psyche, and you're talking about a kid at 7 years old, my psyche, I'm still creating who I'm going to be. I'm still creating my outlook in life. My outlook became, life will always be pain. I'm not important. I just have to live through it, and that's it. And just deal because this is the way life is going to be. And that was a very dark time for me. And that didn't end. I mean, I was molested by several other people before I was 13, but even after that, that didn't end. That went well into my teen years and into my 20s and into my 30s. This sort of, it grew a little bit, but there was this dark outlook on life. I will say one of the first things that changed it for me, and this sounds kind of silly, but when I was in my early 20s, I was to the point where I was agoraphobic, where I was terrified to go out the front door, that I couldn't walk outside without getting panic attacks so bad that I couldn't breathe. And I would just tremble from head to toe. Nothing would get me out that front door because I was so horrified by the idea of other people. So back then, we didn't have social media. So what I did was I joined a bunch of sci-fi fan clubs. I was a sci-fi geek through the mail. And I got myself some pen pals, people I could talk to at a distance in the same way we were talking before, that safe distance that social media now affords. And I was also a Doctor Who geek. And I got a flyer for a Doctor Who convention. Now, like I said, I was terrified to go out my front door. But the doctor I was watching on television, Tom Baker, was going to be in Boston. Like, I lived in Massachusetts at the time. Be in Boston. It's a short bus ride away. It's really ironic and kind of funny that nothing could get me out the front door except the chance to see Tom Baker. Because, my God, will he ever come back? My God, that's my doctor. And at the time, the doctor meant a lot to me because I have a friend now who's also a Doctor Who fan who says the same thing. Like me, he didn't have a male figure in his life. He didn't have a father figure in his life. And his mother was largely absent. My mother was largely absent. The doctor to him, the doctor's heroic attitude, the doctor's pacifistic outlook that war was the last option, that the first option was talk and understand, that he was this character you could look to and say, there's principles and there's ethics I can follow. He meant so much to me. And this is a TV character, but being in that state and alone and no one to turn to, that was my example of what a great man was. And so that dragged me out the door. I went to a convention. I looked at my shoes. I stood in the autograph line and tried not to talk to anybody because I was terrified. But I got cornered by other fans into talking about things. And before I knew it, I was talking to people who wanted to talk about the things I wanted to talk about and who weren't so scary after all. And it didn't happen overnight, but it happened over time. I got involved in a Doctor Who club. I started hanging out with people more. I basically learned how to socialize through fandom and learned how to make friends and how to have human relationships through fandom. And the same friend I was talking about before, he made the comment at one point that when we were young, we were geeks, we were nerds, we were the people in school nobody talked to. So we never learned our social skills through high school the way some people do. We learned our social skills through fandom, and it was just as effective. And knowing that there were people I could talk to, knowing that there were people that were like-minded, made me feel less alone. The big, huge, gigantic turning point came when I finally met a fan who I felt close enough to that I could tell her about the abuse. With still that little fear in the back of my mind, if they find out this, they're going to not want to deal with me, they're going to run away, and they're just going to like, I can't even talk to you. This woman, when I told her, she held me. We cried. I told her how horrible my home life was. I told her about the violence and the terror of the way that I lived, of the fact that no one would let me talk about the abuse, no one would let me share, no one would let me try to process it. I was just told to forget it and put it behind me by everybody in my family. I told her about all this stuff. And she said, why don't you come down here, in the Philly area, why don't you come down here, stay with me while you get a job and get on your feet so you can escape. And that was a gigantic turning point in my life. I was able to get away from all of the darkness. I lived in a small town, a tiny town, which meant everybody knew your business. So while people didn't know what I'd been through sexual abuse-wise, they did know I was this weird kid who looked at the floor and didn't talk to anybody. And that made me a target, and that made me a figure of mockery, that made me somebody to pick on. Basically, I was a weirdo. So getting away from that town and all those people, and getting away from the people, my horrible, horrible, terrifying home life, violent home life, getting away from all of that, getting away from this gag order that had been pushed down upon me by my family, that was like a weight coming off my chest. And that was the real, absolute turning point in my recovery, was getting away from that and learning to stand on my own 2 feet, and learning that things were different in other parts of the world, learning that people were different, learning that not everybody wanted me to shut up, learning that people were supportive, learning that people cared. That was a gigantic thing for me.
Wow. Man, that's great. And so cool that this woman gave you an open door to take. I mean, wow. So few people have the insight to do that. Most people, when they hear of somebody's tragedy, they don't know what to say, and they think maybe the best thing to do is just pull back and not get in somebody's business. But, oh, that's great. Wow. So with that moving forward, you're growing, and I see that progression of you obviously coming through the process and getting more and more freedom and more light shining into your heart and your soul, just your background that became so dark. You're doing a lot now. So tell us more. What are you doing now today, as far as you've come, and still healing, as you've said, we're always healing. What are you doing now to share hope with other people?
Well, I have this show that we've alluded to a couple of times called Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor. It's a stage show. It is a one-man show, but it is interactive. And I've designed it basically around the way that I process information. It's not scripted per se. I have an outline, and I know what I'm going to talk about. And I know the story I'm going to tell because it's my story. I get up there and I tell my story. And one of the unusual things that I do, I did not realize how unusual this was until someone pointed it out to me, is that throughout the performance, there are moments when I will tell part of my story, then stop, then go to the audience for comments and questions, and sometimes people tell their own stories. So I allow that break and that conversation to affect the way I tell the next part of the story. So each performance is a conversation about childhood sexual abuse, about my experiences, about the experiences of people in the audience, about things we can do to change things and help, about things we need to talk about. It becomes this conversation. And I have found that by doing it that way, I have actually helped people, survivors who've come to the show, to be more hopeful about their future and about how they can manage and about how they can actually flourish as opposed to just survive. And that's been a wonderful surprise for me, because for me, I was like, I'm up there and I want to have this conversation and this is going to be good for me. And I want to also from the beginning, I was like, I want to reach out to my fellow survivors because I want them to know, like I know now, that we're not alone. But I didn't realize how much it would succeed. The first time I did the show ends on a hopeful, healing note, and there's several bits throughout the show that talk about that and talk about how we can manage things. I had a survivor, a person I'd known for years, so I didn't know was a survivor until I did the show, walk up to me afterwards and tell me that she just wanted to run around the room screaming at the top of her lungs that everything was going to be okay now because of the experience she had just had. And that just made me feel so incredibly fulfilled and happy. I had set out to try to give people hope that there is a future. And I was giving people hope that there was a future. The other thing I would like to mention is the fact that the second time I did the show in November, an entire peer support group, male peer support group, made it their outing for the day. They came up afterwards and the group of us had this wonderful conversation about stuff that you connect if you're a male survivor. And they all were much more positive, and it made me, I feel like I'm giving them hope, but at the same time, they're giving me hope. And each time I do the show, I get stronger. And each time I do the show, I feel more like things will continue to get better. You know? So I think that it's not just a question of sharing hope with people. I think it's sharing hope with people back and forth, giving and taking. Because my hope and my healing improves every time I do this. Every time I do this.
Yeah, I experienced the same thing. You at a much higher level, obviously, because you're seeing way more people. So right now I'm on your website, and if you want to go check out the website, it's sexabusesurvivor.com, and at the top it'll say Ask a Sexual Abuse Survivor. You'll see a picture there of Michael holding a teddy bear on stage. This is really, really brave stuff, and the way you're communicating this, I mean, you're showing family photos, you as a kid. There's some humor. I've seen some of these videos. It's lighthearted at times. It's dark at times, but it's kind of group therapy theater in a way I've never seen it, and never until talking to you, never thought that there was anything like that out there. Would have never dreamt it up myself. It's really a great opportunity. Huh.
The ironic thing you say about it being so different is I think one of the reasons it's so different is not necessarily because I'm so revolutionary, but because I wrote it and created it to work to my strengths as a performer. And my strengths are improvisation, and my strengths are that sort of connected, no-wall kind of theater. So I wrote it toward that, going, well, this is going to be the best way for me to communicate, and it's my show, so it's going to be my way of communicating. And I keep getting this stuff from people like, wow, that's so amazing and so revolutionary, we've never seen it before. And honestly, that's not what I was thinking. I was thinking, here's how I can tell my story, and I can feel comfortable telling my story. I mean, the other thing that happens during the show, when I was putting the show together, as I would go through my story, I should just start out telling it to the mirror, you know, and figuring out how you're going to do this and what you want to talk about. And every time I ran into something that made me cry or hurt me or made me feel shaky, I just said, okay, well, let's keep that. Because that's the real stuff. That's the important stuff. Basically, in order to do this, I had to go in and rip up all the stitches. Now, that's a scary thing to do, and it's been very difficult. It's a big challenge. But at the same time, the reward has been when I'm on stage and I rip out those stitches, and I do break down and I do cry in front of people, I get nothing but support from them in return. So instead of being this horrifying, isolating moment, it is this beautiful, connected moment.
Yeah, you can see that. Wow. Okay, question 5 then. You're the expert here. How can we begin to share hope? What are the ABCs of getting started, either in sharing hope with somebody else who's been in the abusive situation, or if we are a survivor of abuse, how can we begin to build hope in our own life? Either way you want to go with that, or both.
Well, I think one thing I would say is that seriously take a look around you in your life, because you talked about the 1 in 6. There's a 1 in 6, and that's men who've been sexually abused. There's a 1 in 4 that I think has recently jumped to run, a 1 in 3 of girls who have been abused. The odds are high that you know somebody who's been abused. Take a look around. Look in the eyes of the people who are in your life and your friends, okay? Because if you really look in their eyes, you can see if there's something dark there. It may take a little while to notice, but once you notice it, the greatest thing you can do is be there for them when they want to talk. And understand that no one's asking you to fix their problems. No one's saying, how do I fix this? Just tell me how to fix my life. But to give that moment of an outlet, of a supportive outlet, of somebody who quietly listens and then gives back supportive and encouraging words, that is, I think, the most powerful thing you can give to a human being who's been through any kind of trauma. And yes, we're talking about childhood sexual abuse, but there's also trauma, in war, in battle. There's trauma people who have been victims of robberies or have been terrorized in other ways, or trauma if you've been involved in a situation of natural disaster. There is trauma, and there are people who need someone to talk to. And I think that is a fantastic way that you can share hope. Just be a person who listens. And the other thing I would suggest is be a person who talks. If you have something going on in your life, if there's something that you've held in all your life that's very difficult for you, share that either with your spouse or the person you're with or a friend. And yes, it is true that some people will not be able to handle it and they will back away. Don't judge them. It's an understandable human reaction. But know that if you stick with that and you talk to people, eventually you're going to find that person who will listen. And beyond that, if you are a survivor of some kind of trauma, go on the internet. I know people knock the internet all the time, but go on the internet. Those are people, you put up a message in one of these group boards, and the responses are 80 responses that say, I understand that, I understand exactly what you're saying, and let me tell you why. And you find kindred spirits. You find kindred spirits. So be there and reach out. Those are the two things you can do, I think, from my point of view, that really give people hope.
Good points again. So knowing, number one, just to go back and review to make sure I'm getting it right, what you're saying, Michael, is putting my own opportunity, my own space, the space that I've got in my life, making it available for somebody else who has a story that they need to talk about. And we're all busy. We all have a lot on our minds, and we all have our own stresses, and sometimes we don't want to take on somebody else's. You don't have to inherit their entire set of problems. Just listen and say, hey, it seems like something's going on in your life. Love to hear about it if you just want to sit and talk. Guys, girls, it doesn't matter. People who are ready to start healing are ready to start talking. And that's number one. Number two is, if you've experienced trauma or anything that you've experienced in life, we all have a story, and some are extremely traumatic, some are not, but don't measure in those terms and think about, well, mine's not big enough to be sensational. That's not the point. Just share what's going on as you're healing with other people, and you'll begin to heal more and more. And you'll also find a lot of people who are really ready to join you in that journey and support you or heal with you.
Yeah, it was absolutely beautifully said. Absolutely beautifully said. And the thing you said about the size of your issue, the scale of what you think your issue is or what you've been through, that's an important thing that I had a lot of conversations with fellow survivors about this. There are people who will say, well, you were physically raped. I was just touched. Well, you were touched. I was just shown something I shouldn't have been shown by an adult. And so my pain is not as bad as your pain, so I shouldn't talk. But that's not true. The reality is, I think, personally, personal pain is personal pain. There is no scale of one is more intense or worse or better or deserves more attention than the other. And that's what I hate the context here all the time as well. With what you've been through, how can I even talk? You know what? We've all been through the same thing. That trauma is trauma, and there's no scale to measure that. What you've been through is incredibly important. So don't measure a pain scale against somebody else and decide that you don't need to talk.
Yeah, seriously. So true. Michael, so we've talked about your website, sexabusesurvivor.com. Where else can we find you? So social media, things like that you keep mentioning. Where are you so we can engage in a conversation for anybody who would love to reach out?
Sure. On Facebook, facebook.com/AskASexAbuseSurvivor is the page. And on Twitter, it's twitter.com/AskASurvivor. And that's it.
So as a survivor, if I wanted to reach out and say, hey, I'm dealing with this too, but I'm scared to death that once I do that, I'm now on record somehow. Is there a private way to reach a community that's not gonna expose my Facebook account or leave some trail on Twitter? How do I do that?
There is, absolutely. There are a couple of private groups on Facebook where only the people, you can set a Facebook group to be private, which means only the people who are on it can see what's posted. And so you can have that conversation with people who are looking for the same kind of security. If anybody wanted to write to me and get links for those things, I'd be more than happy to do so. The other way, there are tons and tons of advocacy groups and therapy organizations online on Facebook. If you go to my website, you will see down the right-hand side, there's a link of help for survivors. There are a lot of organizations that offer free counseling and therapy. So you could go either in a peer-to-peer group, or you could go and just talk one-on-one with somebody. So if you financially can't afford to go get therapy, but you want to talk about this with fellow survivors, or you want to talk about this with a clinician, there are organizations that do that. And like I said, there's a ton of them on my website. There's also a ton of them on Facebook. And I think pretty much in most areas of the country, there's some place that offers that kind of thing. So again, I'm more than happy if people have questions and are looking for something, they can contact me and I can help them out with that.
Great. And obviously a great resource for all of us if we can find a show that you're doing near our location. Well worth your time. Yeah, we're going to be doing a tour very, very soon. So I'm also looking for people to email me and let me know if they want me to come where they are. Awesome.
So let me know.
Well, hit the website, sexabusesurvivor.com. All the resources just mentioned are there. I'll also repost all of those at isharehope.com along with the show notes and pictures, videos, everything about Michael and what he's doing, and refocusing back to his resources that he's already listed. And Michael, just wonderful stuff. Michael, let's take a quick detour here. This part that I'm saying right now will be cut out of the audio. But when we start the episode, we pick out some quote of yours from the interview and put that at the beginning, and then immediately follow it with "I'm Michael," or if it was me, I'd say "I'm Chris Williams, host of I Share Hope," and I Share Hope. So people have a little quote, then their name, and I Share Hope, and then the episode music starts, etc. So I'd love it if you could give a quote or two that's just your name and I Share Hope, or your name, what you do, and I Share Hope. Either way you'd like to go, or both. So if that makes sense, I'll be quiet.
No, it totally makes sense.
Mute my microphone and you can have at it. Here we go.
I'll do a few of them, pick up what you like. I'm Michael Broussard, and I Share Hope. I'm Michael Broussard, author and performer of the interactive stage show Ask a Sex Abuse Survivor, and I Share Hope. I'm Michael Broussard, and I Share Hope. I'm Michael Broussard, and I Share Hope. I'm Michael Broussard, and I'm a sex abuse survivor, and I Share Hope.
Man.
I do a lot of acting, so I know how to give you a bunch of different ones.
I was going to say.
Give me a bunch. Give me a bunch of that. Give me a bunch of that reaction, please. Give me like 7 different reactions.
Yeah, each one of them was perfect, and they were all different. How in the world?
Cool, awesome.
Yeah, it's great. Okay.
Do a mix. Do it like with a little beat behind it.
We'll get a little beatbox. That's great.
Why not?
Add some humor to it. Okay, Michael, my brain really is a lot like a 3-year-old's somehow. It never quite grew up the way it should. So just random questions. And in a lighthearted sense, I don't mean this in a heavy way, but you walk out on stage and expose your most intimate secrets. How in the world, and are you just scared to death each time you roll out on stage?
Oh, absolutely. I'm terrified beyond all reason. And I think that in a way just feeds it. I am so scared that I have to focus on one thing, which is the story I'm telling, to shut out all the fear. And that doesn't necessarily always work, but the reality is I'm scared, and people then reassure me. And those breaks give me reassurance. So yeah, every time I go out there, I am terrified.
I bet. Okay, and you're one of the few people I know that if you Google your name and look for images, most of the images that pop up are you holding a teddy bear.
You know they are. It's funny about that because it's about the fact that I didn't have a teddy bear till fairly late in my teens because I was so scared of everything. But the teddy bear, he's kind of become my buddy and my co-star now. When I was looking for a teddy bear, I was trying to find something that was reminiscent of the bear I'd had as a kid. And the bear I had as a kid was long gone because I got the flu so bad. I threw up on him. He smelled, and there was no way we could get the smell out of him. So as an adult, I'm looking for this teddy bear, and I find this teddy bear, the one you see in the picture, that has these long, spindly arms. And I'm like, my God, that's me as a teddy bear. That's my alter ego.
Wow.
So I have this thing that I'm clutching to my chest that becomes, my object of security, but now my object of security is me.
Huh.
So it's kind of nifty.
That's really cool. Yeah, no kidding. Huh. All right, so music for you, if you're just needing to put something in your headphones when you're traveling or just out and about town that just kind of picks you back up and gets you rocking again, what are you going to listen to?
Oh, anything by Bobby Darin. Bobby Darin is my number one, man.
Nice.
Mainly because he's so talented, and he's also done every kind of music, potentially. I mean, you can hear blues, you can hear country, you can hear swing, you can hear rock and roll. Bobby Darin's my number one.
Great. Well, Michael, tremendous time. You've shared so much hope with me. I mean that sincerely. You've given me so much hope. I've got kind of a renewed energy to start working on reaching other people on that specific issue, and new energy just to kind of take some more looks into my own life and keep moving, because it's easy to get stuck. It really is easy to get stuck. It's just hard. So thank you for your time, and thanks for sharing with me and the many others. We're in dozens of countries, and I don't know who listens to all these things. I just know there's a bunch of folks out there, and please check out Michael's work and what he's doing. If you know anybody, or if you've been affected by childhood sexual abuse, it's a great resource. Thank you too for opening up, and this has been a wonderful, re-energizing experience for me. So thank you. Enjoy your day, sir, and wish you all the best. Thank you for sharing. You too. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the Top 10 Actions of Hope from World Leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.